Hi everybody, I'm International Master Andrey Ostrovskiy and you're welcome to the series of lessons dedicated to prophylaxis and prophylactic thinking in chess. In this first lesson, we'll discuss some classics to understand what prophylaxis is. And this first example is taken from the game between Schlechter and Nimzowitsch. Aaron Nimzowitsch was the first top player to present the idea of prophylactic thinking in chess, and he was the first top player who constantly used this method of prophylactic thinking in his own games. So let's have a look at this position and try to understand what is going on. White has much more space, as we can see, so black's pieces are not that active. According to the pawn structure, black has to play something connected with the f7, f5 move just to undermine e4 or to get some chances to push the pawn to f4 then later and to come up with the attack on the king side. But we can see that due to a bad pieces placement, it is not that possible. So bishop f6 is very passive and it really interferes with this plan. So as for queen side, black has no real perspective there, because if black, for instance, plays something like c6, this weakens d6 pawn, and white will have a concrete object of attack. So this gives us an understanding that black actually has no active plan in this position. So in such a situation, it is a great idea just to focus on what opponent wants to do and to try to prevent that. So again, according to the pawn structure, according to white's advantage in space, white has a lot of different chances. So white's typical play could be just like c4, b4, and c5, pushing pawns on the queen side, grabbing more and more space and trying to just create a weakness in black's camp on d6, for example, after exchange c5 takes d6, and also opening the c file, and so on. But for this sort of play, black is more or less prepared, so black has some resources to prevent that, just playing something like b6, controlling c5 additionally, or if necessary to play a5, just controlling b4 square, and so on. And black has no problems with maneuvering heavy pieces on the queen side, just to meet white's play there. So that's okay. What else? White also has a chance to play on the king side. So one of typical ideas is to prepare f4. So white will probably try to do something like knight to g1, then g3 and f4. Very nice plan. This will help white to grab even more space in the position and also challenge black's center to create a threat of further f5, g4, and this could be just devastating. So this consideration gives black a hint what to do. So black has to prevent f4 because, as we can see, it's not that easy to control f4 with the help of pieces, right? So black has only the knight and pawn e5 to control f4, but white will have just much more supporting pieces for this pawn push. So black has to do something to add additional resources to control f4. Black needs actually a pawn on g5. Only in this case it will be possible to prevent white's plan, or at least to make it less efficient. And Nimzowitsch comes up with the move knight to h8. A great move. At first glance it looks just ugly. In fact, black's plan is just to play g5 and come back with the knight to g6, and you can see that black will have much better control over f4 square. And this helps black, of course, to stop white's most dangerous plan. So let's have a look. Knight to g1, g5, g3, knight to g6. Now, if white plays f4, black just takes everything on f4. This weakens dark squares a lot. This weakens white's king as well, and black will be just better. So white has to find something else to try to break through, which gives black the time for improvement of the pieces. So queen goes to d1. White wants to improve the queen somehow to try to exploit some new weaknesses, right? So after g5, we can see f5 square and h5 became vulnerable. Black plays bishop to g7, maybe intending to play f5. Who knows? So if black manages to do that, probably it will be not that bad. F-file will be open. Black will have some counterplay. So queen goes to f3 to prevent that. And Nimzowitsch makes another interesting move. it is a5. Of course, black has no concrete purpose, but this is just a useful move because we discussed earlier one of white's plans is to play c4, b4, so this a5 simply prevents b4. Also creates some additional squares for pieces, so why not? Black still has no active play at the moment, so black just waits. Knight goes to e2, bishop goes to b5. Again, an interesting idea just to improve the position of the bishop a bit and maybe provoke some pawn moves, probably to exploit that in the future. White plays a4, which looks sensible. Bishop goes back to d7. Now we can see that a4 is kind of object of attack. Of course, not very serious, but, well, at least black has something to challenge in white's camp. And rook goes to h1. So now white is ready to continue his attack. White wants to play at some point h4, opening the position on the king side. Another rook is also ready to join this attack from g1, so black has to be ready for that. Again, what white wants to do? White wants to play h4, so what this move changes in a position? So g4 will be weakened in this case, and black can exploit this weakness if, of course, black is prepared well. So Nemtsovich plays another interesting move, queen to e8. At first glance, it looks like black attacks a4, and that's true. So if rook goes away from a1, black can take that pawn. But in fact, the idea behind this move is much more subtle. So black simply wants to put the queen on c8 to control g4 square and to challenge h3 pawn. So white didn't understand the whole idea of the queen e8 move and played carelessly h4, after which queen c8 appeared very nice. So bishop now goes to g4, attacking the queen. The knight on e2 is also hanging. Bishop goes to d3 to protect that. Bishop goes to g4, queen goes to g2, and now pawn takes on h4. So we can see that black is simply better prepared for the opening of the king side. Now black has some concrete targets to attack there. Rook is about to occupy g-file, then bishop goes away, and black simply attacks. So as you can see, prophylaxis is not necessarily a defense, right? So in some cases, if you're good prepared, you can come up with the counterplay, counterattack, just like here. f3, h3, queen to f1, and another nice move that was, of course, prepared in advance, f5. And after f takes g4, f takes e4, attacking the queen and the bishop on d3, black is already much better. So queen h3, pawn takes d3, bishop takes h6, another careless decision. So some tactics, but knight on e2 is still hanging, and after correct move rook h8, white simply resigned because white can't prevent the disaster after simple bishop takes h6 or d3 takes e2. So black has a material advantage in this situation and wins. So let's have a look on the other example from Nemtsovich game. This one was played against Ioner. We can see that black has a much better pawn structure in this position, so white has serious drawbacks on the queen side. Pawns c4, c3, and a2 are all vulnerable and might be attacked by black in the future. At the same time, we can see that white has more space in this position, so especially it is noticeable on the king side where white can come up with some play like f5, g4, g5, and this might be really annoying and very efficient. Since these weaknesses on the queen side like c3, c4, and a2 are constant, so this means black can attack them at any moment, right? It makes a great sense just to start with preventing white's most dangerous plan here. Because if black manages to do that, well, black will be just much better, attacking weaknesses on the queen side and so on. So white's main idea is to play g4, and it is a concrete threat right now, so black starts with the queen d7 move. A bit counterintuitive because usually it makes sense to develop the minor piece and then to support it with another piece, for example, with the queen from behind. But here, black simply has no time for that. That's why Nemtsovich played queen d7, controlling g4 square. That was very important. White played h3, preparing this g4 move. And now looks like black has no chances to prevent g4. In fact, g4 at the moment will be not that great. So Nemtsovich first of all played knight to e7. A good move, preparing knight f5. At some point, it will be a strong point for the knight, if black manages, of course, to prevent g4 move. So as you can see from here, the knight will attack e3 pawn and control weakened already g3 square. So a good idea, but what the point? Why white can't play g4? White actually can do that, but after h5, undermining move, white will experience problems with the king because the king became quite exposed. If white plays g5, let's say, then knight goes to h7 and h3 is already hanging, and the queen is about to occupy this square even if pawn goes to h4, and there will be a lot of different ideas connected with checks from g3, h3, and also black can continue with further undermining activity, playing f6, taking on g5, and making position on the king side more and more exposed. So if f5 instead of g5, then h takes g4, h takes g4, and g6. Very nice undermining move. And again, we can see that black simply has more pieces on the king side, which means black is better prepared for activity there. And well, black will benefit from this because, again, white's king is quite vulnerable. So after knight e7, white decided to prepare his activity and play queen to e1. Just trying to activate the queen somehow, at the same time controlling weakened g3 square. But this leaves h5 not controlled enough, and Nemtsovich simply played h5. Programmatic move, and again, sort of prophylaxis. So now g4 is really controlled. White won't have real chances to play g4 because black has so many pieces controlling this square already, and black has a chance to improve this situation. That's the point. So, for example, queen h4 makes no sense here. Knight goes to f5, and after queen g5, knight goes to h7, forcing the queen to h5, after which knight g3 wins material. So white decided to continue development, bishop d2. It is not really a development because bishop on d2 is not better than on c1. It is very passive actually, but at least white will have some chances to improve its position maybe in the future through e1. And now queen goes to f5. At first glance looks like knight should be on f5, and that was the plan, right? But if knight goes to f5, this allows g4. So first of all, queen goes to f5 to have a better control over position. And after king h2, queen goes to h7. Great maneuver. So at first glance, queen on h7 is very passive. In fact, it is very good here because black simply prevents g4. At any moment white plays g4, black simply takes, and as you can see, king on h2 appears under attack. That's the point. So now black is simply ready to occupy f5 with the knight. So as you can see, Nemtsovich constantly thinks of opponent's possibilities and tries to prevent them. It is the typical appearance of the prophylactic thinking and prophylaxis itself. a4, knight goes to f5, and now black even has a concrete threat. So for instance, if white continues with the a5 move, which is quite logical after a4, black plays knight g4, and if takes g4, and king g1, then g3. And queen h2 is simply inevitable, so black simply wins here. So after knight f5, it is necessary to play g3, and well, we can see that white has no chance to play g4 anymore, so black can fix the pawn on a4. It is additional weakness in white's position, so white now has a4 and c4. They are targets for black's pieces, so black can come up with the attack against those weaknesses at any moment. Rook goes to g1, and knight to h6, just additionally controlling g4 square, connecting the bishop to this fight for this g4 square, maybe intending to occupy f5 square with the bishop if necessary, but it won't be necessary probably. So the point is just to prevent g4. Nice prophylaxis. Bishop goes to f1, protecting h3. Bishop goes to d7 now, just keeping an eye on a4 pawn and making this rook passive. Bishop goes to c1, white simply has no active plan now, and rook goes to c8. Again, concrete move. So black wants to open up the c-file at some point, maybe to play bishop e6 then. So if white wants to avoid bad consequences of this opening of the c-file, he has to play d5. Closing position completely, so now both bishops are quite passive, and black can benefit from it. And we can see that now when there is no pressure in the center is completely closed, black has a chance to come up with the active play. But where? Well, kingside is possible to exploit in this particular case, because only black has a chance to change the situation there. So black has a possibility to come up with this plan, g5, which will open up the g file, and black starts this plan preparation. So king goes to h8, knight e2, rook goes to g8, bishop g2, and g5. And soon after this, black managed to coordinate all the pieces on the king side and won the game. So again, as you can see, prophylaxis is not necessarily a defense. Of course, it looks like a defense at first glance because black does everything to prevent something, right? So black comes up with a defense against white's ideas, plans, moves, and so on. But in fact, it is a very, very active process. So yeah, you defend some squares, some pieces, some pawns maybe, but sooner or later, when you have a chance, you just come up with a counterplay or active plan. That's the point. So never confuse a prophylaxis with a defense. So it is an active process and very important process. Just imagine that black didn't do this in this game. So it could be completely different. So if white plays g4, g5, white will just smash black with a lot of space and much better position. But black managed to do everything to prevent this plan, and appeared that without this plan, white simply has no any other active play in this situation, which means black was just better after all. Thank you for your attention. See you next lessons.